Welcome to Fortune's first, our inaugural Brainstorm Tech International. Thank you all for being here. We are so thrilled to be here in this beautiful, extraordinary city of Guangzhou. And we're tapping into the strength, as most of you know, of our DNA of our famous Fortune Brainstorm Tech Conference, which we hold every year in Aspen, Colorado, which we've done that for the last 16 summers, collecting the sort of best minds, the best tech minds in media, in finance, across the board for a great conversation, a candid conversation about the trends that are shaping this world. And over the next day and a half or so, we're going to explore the homegrown innovation here in China, which I think is now starting to be revealed to the world. This is an extraordinary time here in China, an explosion of growth in ideas and new thinking and new strategies across the board in artificial intelligence, in biotech and fintech, in automotive, and you name it. It's across the board. Social media, an entire ecosystem is being developed here. So we're thrilled to have that. We're going to be sharing some of these insights, but also introducing you to some innovators, some new startups, and bringing together those new exciting voices from here, along with experts from Silicon Valley and Israel and Asia and Europe throughout. The launch of our Brainstorm Tech International Conference, you may have noticed, is being co-located and timed to coincide with our annual Fortune Global Forum, which is also being held here in Guangzhou, we're thrilled to say. And so you'll notice a lot more security for that as we bring in world leaders and corporate leaders into that. First, before we get started, we've got a busy couple of days. I'd love to introduce our Brainstorm Tech International co-chairs, Adam Lashinsky, who's executive editor of Fortune, and Clay Chandler, who's executive editor international of Time Inc. We, as I said, have an exciting program. We also have some fantastic sponsors. I'd like to introduce our presenting partner and thank them, Guangzhou Automobile Group, and our partners, Guangzhou Pharmaceutical Holdings Limited, Tencent, and Atom Think Tank, and our knowledge partner, McKinsey & Company. We have an app which you can access current information about the conference online. And to go to that, go to the App Store or Google Play and search under Fortune BSTI 2017. You can also follow the conference in Chinese or in English using the mini program provided by WeChat by scanning the QR code available at registration and around the networking area. The mini program is provided by WeChat Tencent. And just a friendly reminder of our media policy. What is said on stage or in the roundtables is on the record and can be used for reporting, blogging, or tweeting by any of the gathered media here. But what's said at dinner table or over a break or conversations walking around is private unless both of you agree otherwise. So just keep that in mind. And now I'd like to introduce you to the president of Fortune and our chief content officer of Time Inc., who will moderate our first panel discussion. Please welcome to the stage, Alan Murray.
Thank you, Cliff. So I made my first trip to Guangzhou in September of last year. And while I was here, the government of the city put together a panel of entrepreneurs, some of them in biotech, some of them in technology. And it was such an impressive panel. And I realized that while the whole world has a really good idea of what's happening in Silicon Valley, most people in the West have only a very weak idea of the burgeoning innovation that's happening here in China. And so that's the reason we worked with the government of Guangzhou to put together Brainstorm Tech International, our very first, and we're really glad that you are all here to be a part of it. To start us off, we have a really great panel to talk about the conditions that allow innovation to thrive, and I want to bring them out now. First up is Jay Walker, who is a compulsive serial entrepreneur. He started 3 companies that have grown more than 50 million customers, including Priceline.com. He personally holds more than 500 patents. I think he's like the 10th most patented man alive in the world right now. And he's also provided a number of artifacts from his personal museum that you should take the time to look at out in the hallway during one of the breaks. It's really fascinating. Second, with Jay, Roger Luo, who is the president of DJI, which has very quickly skyrocketed to the leading edge of the rapidly growing drone business. And then also Zeng Guangming, who is the chief content officer for KuaiShou, which is, as many of you probably know, a rapidly expanding app for sharing videos and photos here in China. So let me invite the panelists out to the stage now, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thank you.
You each have translation devices, and while we're untying these and getting them in place, Jay, let me start with you. Because I know you have made a study of innovation and the history of innovation, and your artifacts are a piece of that history. Tell us, what are the conditions that have to be in place to allow innovation to thrive?
Well, Alan, there are quite a few, but I think let's talk about what innovation is first, and then we'll talk about how it happens. So innovation is a significant new change. That's different than improvement. There are a lot of improvements that somebody might say are innovative or clever, but I think we're talking about innovation in the big sense of the word, a real change. Innovation is a tension between the old and the new, and that tension is evident in China, in the world that China is. This amazing tension between a multi-thousand-year legacy and the new China, which surrounds us here in Guangzhou, and 70 and 100-story buildings everywhere we look. So innovation is about disagreeing with the old. Now, in a Confucian culture, disagreeing with the old is a difficult problem. It's not that it's frowned on, it's just not culturally correct. And yet, in America, when Bill Gates drops out of college, Americans say, fabulous, Bill Gates has dropped out of college, he's going to create Microsoft. In China, you drop out of college, that's not so good. And yet many innovators are the people who argue with the old. They hear their own thing. And that makes it very challenging to find ways in the Chinese structure to have innovation, disruption, disagreement inside a culture that doesn't generally want that. So that's the Chinese challenge.
Yeah, that's a great way of setting it up, Jay. Roger, let me ask you, you've worked in Silicon Valley.
Yep.
You built your very successful company here in Shenzhen. What are the advantages and disadvantages of each culture?
各位来宾、嘉宾好，我是大江罗振华。
Hi, I'm Roger from DJI. I have worked in Silicon Valley for 4.5 years, and in China, I have worked for about 12 years. And I think the whole the big difference between Silicon Valley and China is that the U.S. is using all talents from all over the world, and in China, to innovate, it means that it has been rapidly developing in recent years, and the executive and the people are working in this in this world environment, and then all new talents are using this environment, and I think the background for the U.S. and China are very, very different in that sense.
Jay's point, which is in a culture that traditionally honors the old, is it difficult to create the new?
Yes, of course. And I think in China, for innovation in China, I think it's a new concept. It is definitely correct that there are many famous innovation in China, but that was in the past. But I think a lot of people are depressed here or pressed here because they're not really encouraged to have new ways of thinking. But I think we're changing in China, and we are having a new environment, and we are encouraging people to think outside the box. And this is the big difference between U.S. and China.
So Zeng, let me ask you from your point of view, how has it been? I mean, your company is growing very fast. I think you have 700 million users now. It's becoming sort of the hot platform for sharing photos and videos. How do you find the environment for innovating, for staying at the front edge?
I think it's very similar to what Roger said. China, in recent 100 years, there are no new innovations or discoveries. And I don't think in China, you don't see that many very inventors or famous Chinese inventors. There are some famous invention in China, but in China, those inventions were developed through many days or many years of development. It's from a group of people. It's not just from one person. So for KuaiShou technology, and I can deeply feel that when Chinese people, when billions of people, they are committed to one thing, you can see invention coming from these billions of people. In the past, it is not easy to receive information or education. So we were depressed in the past, but then with mobility and with very cheap measurements and very expensive measurements, we can see that many people in rural areas can receive information.
And we discovered that Chinese people's capacity of creation started to rise. Probably we haven't seen so many star companies, innovation companies yet. But in the past 5 years, China has made a very obvious progress. And I believe probably the major inventions will come from these several billion of people from China. 那 Jay 你要说两句吗？
I wanted to ask, I wanted to follow up, Guangming, on that. In the media space in particularly, I think those of us in the West tend to look or tend to think that openness and innovation and political expression somehow go hand in hand. And obviously they've been decoupled in China. Is it a problem for KuaiShou that there are controls on political expression, or is it irrelevant to what you're doing?
我相信
I believe after getting the information, people's vision will be expanded and their wisdom will be further expanded as well. And the communication with the others will make this world better. In Chinese society, in the old ancient time, China has a huge population, huge population. And in different cities of China, there is a huge disparity between urban and rural areas, and also population wisely. There are different groups, and also there are disparities as well. And there is a huge separation between individual person. If one rural young person would like to go to city to develop, there is a space, distance, as well as different levels of hierarchy, social hierarchy, and it's pretty hard to break through. But the mobile interconnect interconnection technologies connect them all, connect the individuals all. A young person from the tier 6 county level could get the same information from as a young person from the tier 1 city in China. So which could fully incentivize each individual in China. This not only does not only exist in China, but also in the United States. Last year, around 50% of the United States, their voices couldn't be heard. So information is also being segregated. China probably is more severe than that of the United States. But with the mobile technology, China could catch up at least 20 years that have been experienced by the United States, and the rural people start to connect with the city people. And even though there are different, there might be a lot of first encountering between different groups of people, and there might be some problems, there might be some controversial issues, but we've seen that Chinese society started to communicate and started to have dialogues between different groups of people, so that when we have a better understanding, we can progress together towards a better direction. I believe this is the mobile internet and KuaiShou technology, what they brought to us. Thank you.
I think there's two really good pieces of great news for China, and I think you're touching on one of them. I think the first piece of great news for China and innovation is that before 1500, China invented everything. Everything, okay?
Which your display in
as
the lobby.
As a person who collects the history of imagination, China invented money, China invented navigation, it invented instruments. I mean, in the history of the world, before 1500, the Chinese empire, it was the inventive empire in the world. The dawn of the scientific revolution in its process of creating hypothesis, testing a hypothesis, and then revalidating it that anybody could do, essentially went so against the Confucian way that China never embraced that science and technology process, which today it now fully embraces. So the good news is that the Chinese are back, and they are the most inventive people in all of history. The second good news is that innovation is moving from the individual, though the genius will always play a critical role. You know, Albert Einstein is not going to be a committee, but it is moved to the collaboration of a group.
Interesting.
And what's happening with the digital revolution and the mobile revolution, as you pointed out, is that somebody in Guangzhou and somebody in Shanghai and somebody in the Western province can all together form a virtual group. And as we start to add augmented reality and ultimately virtual reality, they will feel they are in the same room, speaking the same language. And in China, they're even in the same time zone. It's only one time zone for the whole country, as hard as that is to imagine sometimes, which means they're all at the same time. So those advantages of distributed collaboration, of instantaneous communication, of ad hoc group formation, supported by digital tools for big data processing, machine learning, et cetera, I think augment extremely well for China's innovation future. Of course, that doesn't take anything away from the cultural context of having to challenge authority, not authority in political sense, but authority in your teacher tells you this is wrong, and you say, no, the teacher is wrong. Well, in China, that's not generally how it's done, but it's a big country.
Roger, there are other advantages you see here in China. People tell me, for instance, that the government is providing financing to startups that's a significant factor in the kind of burgeoning innovation we see. Are there other advantages?
我想从整个大
From the DJI's development process, talents are still the major strength. Because DJI was born in China, but facing the world. In the process of development for DJI, DJI provided provide a new, brand new possibility for most of the tech companies in China. We don't have to copy the others, Chinese companies could find a brand new innovation approach. So this is very important, especially for those young people in China who have the offer from the top companies from the world. So DJI established such a platform and attracted a group of young people with the average age of less than 27 years. Their creation and their execution capability could be released. And with the government support and with the provincial policy support, you can see that China's very confident in future innovation. Thank you.
You've clearly taken the lead in drone development. What are the other areas where China has actually gone to the front of the pack and is doing leading edge innovation?
其实出
There are a lot of areas. In terms of the drone area, there are a lot of prosperously developing companies. For example, e-commerce, online payment, internet, and in the tech world of the world, China plays a very important role in these three sectors. I believe there will be better development in the future in those three areas.
Advantage also in the coming biotech century, Alan. This is a culture that not only embraces biological research, but is determined from the top down to be giant leaders. As the curator of TED-Med, I can tell you that the Chinese research efforts and their funding levels are extraordinary, and we are entering a biological age with synthetic biology and CRISPR-Cas editing tools. I would be amazed if China wasn't, if not one or two, certainly creating the kinds of innovations that are more difficult to come out of the American labs with their much higher restrictions on what can and can't be tried.
So let me ask, we only have a few minutes left, but let me ask all three of you before we leave the stage. We're going to have a lot of entrepreneurs presenting here this afternoon talking about their technology. What's the one thing you would tell them to allow their companies and innovation to thrive in the Chinese context? Guangming, I'll start with you.
我觉得还
I think we can continue the previously mentioned topics of what strength you have in China when doing innovation. Companies like KuaiShou technology, for example, or companies like us, we learned from Google, from Silicon Valley, the AI technologies and brought them into China. But only in China, the AI technologies could be applied into the food industry, and then we can create this company as KuaiShou. So there will be 500 to 700,000, a million of people moving into the middle-level group of people. So it has never happened in the world. You can only achieve that in China. And in other times, in other countries, so you cannot. But this is a very good opportunity for companies like us, KuaiShou. And a lot of companies, if you want to start up your business, you could have this opportunity, and that's my suggestion.
The scale of the consumer market is a big advantage. Jay.
Well, I wouldn't presume to tell Chinese entrepreneurs too much, but here's what I would say. All entrepreneurs are in the same business, and that is the business of solving customer problems quickly and efficiently. If you are listening to your customers, if your organization like yours is designed to hear its customers very rapidly, and if you have respect for those customers' opinions so that you modify your engineering, modify your product, modify your service offering, you are far more likely to adapt quickly, grow faster, and truly innovate. Much of the innovation will come from the customer if you listen. Entrepreneurs are generally not good listeners. It's just not their strength. They're busy telling you, I've got it, I've solved it, I've done it, invest, buy, versus tell me again, tell me again, tell me again. So a great entrepreneur, and there are many in the world and many in China, they actually listen to their customers in 1,000 ways, and then have their organizations respond quickly to what they hear, as opposed to slowly because they think they know better.
Interesting. Roger.
我想整个
I think Chinese people's signature is diligent, but I would like to tell the startup innovators we need to go back to the basics. And for DJI, we have this model that we need to go back to the basics, and that's what we hope all the startup or the innovators should stick to your direction and to find to fill in those vacant areas. So Dajiang has already had more than 10 years, but in the first 5 years, DJI was very silent. But our founder started from the first day, had been sticking to the same direction. So don't just follow up the fashion, just stick to your own judgment and keep on working on it.
And Jay, can you very quickly give everyone an introduction to the artifacts you have outside?
So I have, as Alan mentioned, one of the world's great private libraries, excuse me, on the history of human imagination. I've chosen 25 artifacts from a page from a Gutenberg Bible, from a rock from the planet Mars, from a book woven in Chinese silk to the oldest Chinese pharmacopoeia printed from 1100 AD. They're on 2 tables outside the room, and I invite you to come and look at them. There's descriptions in English as well as in Chinese on the side. So I look forward to meeting many of you personally.
It's fabulous. Thank you for bringing it. Thank you all three for getting this conference off to an excellent, interesting start.
谢谢 Thank you.